I have a problem. A while back, I made a poor decision in my collecting of the Thousand Suns. I bought a Helldrake. I knew it was wrong at the time. I saw the warning vids. Overcosted, understated. But still, it's a giant metal dragon. I mean, that's the argument I made when I bought the second one as well. Again, I have a problem. But this has really made me wonder about, at the very least, the problem with Helldrakes, as well as the problem with aircraft in general. And I've had a few thoughts. Before we get into that, thanks for watching. If you're into tabletop gaming and are new to the channel, don't forget to tap that subscribe button, maybe the like if you're so inclined. As well, don't forget we have a community Discord linked below. Join up if you want to talk about all things tabletop gaming. With that said, let's go over the aircraft problem in current 10th edition 40k, and maybe take a look at a possible slight glimmer of hope. It's important to note that this info is coming out of the 1.1 rules commentary as well as the autumn data slate. As with most things in Games Workshop, the tides actively shift over time. Try to check in and see any changes on the Warhammer community page. It's also important to note that in looking through a lot of the data cards, there is a difference between straight up aircraft and hover aircraft. More on that in a bit. First up, why the concept of aircraft just doesn't seem to fit the competitive 40k scene. I say competitive because if you want to run an orc air force in a narrative or more casual setup, I'm all for it. It almost feels very orky to do, and they do seem to have a very wide selection of possibilities. But if we take a peek at what limitations are placed on aircraft, one of the big ones is that the vehicle must start in reserve. Now, aircraft are meant for speed and aggression. They're meant to zip all over the board in a way that can't be caught and just be able to do whatever they want. So already they are limited to appearing on the field in turn 2. And that speed is limited to the basic deployment, just 6 inches from the table edge, and still restricted by the 9 inches from enemies, and not in enemy deployment until turn 3. Also, most aircraft sit in the 150 point range. Some cost more, like my 195 point cost Thousand Suns Helldrakes. Some cost less, like the Orc aircrafts. The issue with this is that the strategic reserves most armies have access to only equal a quarter of the total on-field points value. In some instances, a single aircraft can take up a sizable chunk of that, depending on your overall strategy. Beyond this, the limitations applied to their movement make them way too predictable. The facing that they enter the field with is the direction they have to move in the following turn. If an enemy wants to avoid any bombing abilities, they'll just have to move in their turn. This could be advantageous, as forcing enemies to move can give your units better attack angles and free up some threat range. The issue is, if you end your move, you can only turn 90 degrees, and if your new facing has a board edge at less than 20 inches, that aircraft is gone in the following turn. The sequence for something like that would look like on board in turn 2, move in turn 3, off board in turn 4, returns from reserve in turn 5 on the board edge. That isn't a lot of ability potential. If you consider that a strike force board size is 44 by 60, there are only a few ways that allow you to keep the aircraft on the field. And if your opponent has the knowledge and means needed to actively screen the better arrival spots, you're kinda screwed. Also, I don't know if you noticed, we've been scrolling around some data cards, taking a look at stats. Did you see a big issue? Maybe? Well, you and I both know 40k is a game of point scoring. You do that by capturing objectives, performing tasks, and in a lot of situations, you'll use the OC stat for this. Yeah, aircraft seem to universally come with 0 of that. This also doesn't help the side missions that require units to control things to gain benefit. Behind enemy lines can't even be scored at all by aircraft. The deck is just consistently stacked against these vehicles. It's just too many points and too limited in its use to amount to any positive gains in most situations. For 195 points, I'd be better off taking an allied changeling among other small support and mission units. And again, I have 2 of them. They're hard to move around the field, they're big and dangly, their wings are obnoxious, being able to see over certain terrain doesn't seem too useful, limiting what can melee them to flying units isn't that helpful, but they do have hover, and I did see something interesting in the rules commentary. So hover on aircraft does some fun things. For one, it removes the aircraft keyword. This means the model can be set up on field in turn 1. It can also charge into melee. It has its movement limited to 20 inches, but come on, that's a lot of movement. The OC is still 0, so that's sad, but it can now score on behind enemy lines, which isn't bad at all. It has more control of its movement, which makes scoring on other missions much easier, and there is one odd thing here. Something that came up when I was trying to figure out how to get certain vehicles and models in melee with the Helldrake, as I assumed it was using the base under all the obnoxious wings. Take a look at this. Now, quick reminder, this is Games Workshop. They might have forgotten about the Helldrakes and possibly other aircraft that can go into hover mode who happen to be a little under 5 inches tall. Also, I should probably show the GW definition of a hull as well. You know, muddy the waters even further with the rules. There will probably be more information dropped on this that changes things, but for now, think of this. A Helldrake in hover, on field in turn 1. The silhouette formation for this is shown on the GW website. Now, I've seen alternate setups with the wings aimed down. This goes into a whole modeling for advantage thing. I don't even want to touch on that yet. Consider the whole picture here. The Helldrake is a vehicle with a base. Measuring for all of its rules is always to the closest point, be it the hull, which pedantically could include its wingtips, or to the base it is above. This possibly makes the Helldrake one of the largest footprint basic models in the game, outside of things like the Baneblade and some of the crazier Forge World models. I would argue that this makes the Helldrake one of the best potential move blockers in the game. Turn 1, if it lives of course, it gets its 20-inch movement, a nice little attack if it wants, and then maybe a charge. You know, tie up a unit right away. But then, most units nearby won't be able to pass under its wings, as those should be considered in engagement range, and only some things can pass within engagement range of enemies. For at least a turn, you could shut down a ton of enemy movement. It's an almost 200-point sacrifice, which is pretty hefty, but board control for a turn or two can be massively advantageous. And I'm not just talking about Thousand Sun Helldrakes. Chaos Space Marines and the Pantheon factions all have access to this potential. Again though, it's only a potential if local tournament organizers and even your local scene agrees with this admittedly pedantic reading of the rules commentary. But it is something to think about when it comes to the potential usefulness of an otherwise seemingly useless unit type. I found some success in turn 1 tying down blast vehicles with my Helldrakes, even a little try-hard potential in running fixed side missions that require units to be in specific places like behind enemy lines or engage on all fronts. And just a reminder to my Thousand Sun brothers in Dust, 20-inch movement quickly becomes 40 when Cabal points are involved. Kinda makes no place unreachable. It's all food for thought on the subject of aircraft, and of course, it can change on a whim from Games Workshop. Pretty sure we have another data slate coming soon after posting this vid. We'll have to check back in then. But what do you think of aircraft in 40K? Have you tinkered around with any odd methods of using them? Discovered any hidden tech people aren't ready for that makes their cost worth it? Let us know in the comments below. I'm thinking of doing more of these random thought topic videos where we explore units and rules going forward. Let me know if there is anything I need to look into that could be fun. And as a reminder, the Discord is linked below. Continue the conversation over there if you're interested. As always, likes for the like god and subscribes for the subscribe throne. I am Kimerix, and I'll see you in the next one.